America in the 1960s, a time of upheaval, of change, of war. The Vietnam War tore at the fabric of American society. Hawks cried for victory, doves yearned for peace, families divided, friendships fractured. In this maelstrom, religion played a pivotal role. For many, faith was a source of solace, a beacon of hope. But for others, the war presented a profound moral dilemma. Could they, in good conscience, support a war that seemed to violate the very tenets of their faith? The answer, for a growing number of priests, was a resounding no. These men of God, sworn to preach peace and love, found themselves compelled to raise their voices against the war. They saw the suffering. They felt the pain. They could not remain silent. Their journey was not easy. They faced scorn, ridicule, imprisonment. Yet they persevered, driven by their faith and a deep sense of moral obligation. They were the priests who opposed the Vietnam War. Why did they speak out? What compelled these men, who had dedicated their lives to spiritual guidance and the service of their communities, to step into the turbulent waters of political dissent? What drove these men of the cloth to challenge the status quo, to stand against a powerful government, and to voice their opposition to a war that was dividing the nation? They risked their reputations, their freedom, and even their safety for a cause that seemed increasingly lost. They faced arrest, public scorn, and the possibility of alienation from their own congregations. The answer lay in their faith. Their deep, unwavering belief in the teachings of their religion guided their actions. The horrors of war, the senseless violence, and the widespread destruction clashed with their deeply held beliefs. They could not reconcile the images of suffering and death with the principles of love and compassion that they preached. They saw the war as immoral, unjust, a conflict that violated the very essence of their faith, a violation of the sanctity of human life. The loss of innocent lives, the suffering of civilians, and the destruction of communities weighed heavily on their consciences. They were inspired by the words of the prophets, the teachings of Jesus. Love thy neighbor. Turn the other cheek. Blessed are the peacemakers. These were not just ancient texts, but living principles that demanded action. These were not just words on a page. They were a call to action, a moral imperative that could not be ignored. They were principles to live by, principles that required them to stand up against injustice, even when it was difficult, even when it was dangerous. The priests saw the war's impact on their communities. They witnessed the grief of families who had lost loved ones, the sorrow of communities torn apart by loss. Young men returning home in body bags, families torn apart. The human cost of the war was undeniable and deeply personal. The poor and marginalized bearing the brunt of the conflict. Those who were already struggling were the ones who suffered the most. They could not, in good conscience, remain silent. Their faith compelled them to speak out, to use their voices to advocate for peace and justice. They had a moral obligation to speak truth to power, to challenge the government, to stand up for what was right, even when it was unpopular, to awaken the conscience of a nation. Their faith demanded it. Their humanity demanded it. They believed that by standing together, by raising their voices, they could make a difference. They could bring about change. And so they marched, they protested, they prayed, and they hoped for a better future. These priests were not content to simply preach against the war from their pulpits. They felt a deep moral obligation to act, to transform their words into deeds. They took their message to the streets, joining the masses in protest. Their presence was a powerful symbol, a testament to their unwavering commitment to peace. To the halls of power, they carried their message. They sought to influence those who had the authority to end the conflict, engaging in dialogues and debates with politicians. To the very heart of the war machine, they marched in protests, organized demonstrations, and spoke at rallies. Their voices rang out, demanding an end to the violence. They wrote letters to newspapers, hoping to sway public opinion. They lobbied politicians, tirelessly advocating for peace. Their voices, once confined to the walls of their churches, now echoed across the nation. Some went even further, taking bolder steps to make their stand. They engaged in acts of civil disobedience. They blocked draft boards, destroyed draft records, and occupied government buildings. Their actions were a direct challenge to the machinery of war. They were willing to face arrest and imprisonment. Their commitment to their cause was unshakable, even in the face of personal sacrifice. anything to shine a light on the injustice of the war. They spoke passionately, their words a beacon of hope and resistance. Their actions were not without risk. They were constantly under surveillance, their every move watched. They were branded as traitors, communists, and un-American. They were harassed, threatened, and attacked. Yet they remained resolute, their faith unshaken. Their faith gave them courage. It was their guiding light, their source of strength in the face of adversity. Their convictions fueled their actions. They believed deeply in the righteousness of their cause. They were a thorn in the side of the establishment, a constant reminder of the moral cost of war. A constant reminder of the moral cost of war. They spoke of the human toll, the lives lost, and the families torn apart. They were the conscience of a nation struggling to find its soul. Their actions, their words, and their unwavering faith left an indelible mark on the history of the Vietnam War era. Among the most prominent of these dissenting voices was Father Daniel Berrigan, a Jesuit priest, a poet, a prophet for peace. Father Berrigan was a man of many talents and deep convictions, whose words and actions resonated with those who yearned for a more just and peaceful world. Berrigan saw the Vietnam War as a moral abomination. He believed it was a conflict that not only caused immense suffering, but also eroded the moral fabric of society, a betrayal of American values. To him, the war contradicted the principles of freedom and justice that America was supposed to stand for. He was drawn to the plight of the Vietnamese people. Their suffering became a personal call to action for him. He witnessed firsthand the devastation wrought by American bombs, the innocent lives lost, the villages destroyed. He couldn't stay silent. The images of shattered lives and broken communities haunted him, compelling him to speak out. Berrigan believed in the power of nonviolent resistance. He saw it as the most potent weapon against tyranny and injustice. Inspired by Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., he embraced civil disobedience as a way to confront injustice. He believed that peaceful protest could awaken the moral conscience of the nation. To awaken the conscience of a nation, he aimed to stir the hearts and minds of the American people, to make them see the war for what it truly was. He was arrested numerous times for his anti-war activities. Each arrest was a testament to his unwavering commitment to peace. He spent years in prison, yet these incarcerations only strengthened his resolve. He used his time behind bars to reflect, write, and plan future actions. Yet he never wavered in his belief that the war was wrong. His sermons and writings continued to inspire and mobilize people against the war. That peace was the only answer. He envisioned a world where conflicts were resolved through dialogue and understanding, not violence. Berrigan's faith was his compass. It guided his actions, gave him strength. His deep spiritual beliefs were the foundation of his activism. He saw the face of Christ in the suffering Vietnamese people. To him, their pain was a reflection of the suffering of Christ, and the young Americans sent to fight in a senseless war. He empathized with the soldiers, many of whom were just as much victims of the war as the Vietnamese. He was a shepherd tending to his flock. He saw his role as guiding and protecting those who were lost and suffering, a voice crying out in the wilderness. His was a solitary voice at times, but it was a voice that echoed with truth and conviction, a beacon of hope in a time of darkness. In a world overshadowed by war and conflict, Father Berrigan's unwavering commitment to peace and justice shone brightly, offering hope and inspiration to countless individuals.